Over the past few weeks, the customer service world has been particularly saturated with announcements of LLM integrations. This is not a huge surprise though. Over 70% of global data and analytic decision makers whose organizations are implementing AI said that their companies plan to increase spending on transformer networks and LLM integrations over the next 12 months. Undoubtedly, hence, generative AI is the talk of the town, and many want to be first to the party. From increasing developer productivity through text to code generation, enabling graphic designers to ideate quickly with text to image generators, to empowering marketing and content creators, LLM applications are everywhere. But this technology is still a black box for many. We are here to unveil what it means for your enterprise and for your customer support function in particular. I'm excited to welcome the panelists of our keynote session, Rowan Karan, analyst at Forrester, and Alok Ramsasaria, CEO, Grizzy Interactive, to discuss this in detail. Welcome, Rowan. Welcome, Alok. We are glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much.
To kick off, Alok, if I may start with you, we're honestly witnessing a pivotal moment in AI unfold right before our eyes. Enterprises are all going crazy about experimenting with this technology. And as someone who's at the center of all this LLM innovation happening at Grizzy, what are your 2 cents for enterprises looking to reap its benefits, but also staying mindful of potential pitfalls and security risks?
I agree. I think you captured it perfectly. It's the perfect storm, right? This is everybody's worried. I think I speak to a couple of CIOs every week about, and their top priority is that the boards are asking them, okay, what to do about generative AI, what to do about LLMs, how to innovate in the enterprise. While I think ChatGPT in particular has captured the public imagination of the world at large, and every day there are both expectation, I would say, epitomes of despair and depths of despair and epitomes of hope that emerge every day. I think at enterprises, we all need to evaluate very carefully what to invest in, how to invest in. Do not, I think, this is what we tell all our CIO customers, don't look at blanket LLMs. They're still fairly insecure. There are no guardrails really out there. And, black hat actors are using these probably as much as the white hat actors. So make sure that you're not investing blindly. Look at feature/function specific models that will work for support, for sales use cases. Make sure there are strong security data processing agreements in place to ensure that your LLM is not going to result in leakage of confidential customer, product, services data that could be of benefit in the open world. Do ask for explainability, and not even more than explainability, the ability to control the backend, right? The lack of an administrative control is a key challenge to a lot of enterprises. If they can't see what's going on with the tool, then they are very wary of investing in that tool. And it applies to LLMs as well. Where are the knobs that I can see? Where are the reports that I can look at? I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of these large models like ChatGPT are not really trained on the specific subsets. So either some of these models are now available. They're, I think, a few gigabytes, so you can run them in your own private instance. Look at those, or look at specific small models that are being evaluated and that are trained on your use case, which will give you probably better results. And use them selectively. Large language models are exactly that. They're large language models. And I know I'm sounding slightly skeptical while acknowledging the power that it suddenly puts in the hand of the individual. Inside the enterprise, you have to make sure that, I know some enterprises have, for example, completely banned using ChatGPT while they are able to establish the security profile of ChatGPT on official laptops. So I think, as you mentioned, it's a inflection point. We all need to figure out our strategies, and I think we are particularly privileged to have Rowan here with us, who's been exploring this in detail to help us navigate the waters. So over to you, Rowan. I look forward to learning from you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Alok. So happy to be here with you all. And I'm so excited to talk to everybody about generative AI today, and specifically some of the applications for it in customer service. So to kind of kick us off here, I'm going to start by talking a bit about, generative AI as a whole. So I think, as many of us have come to realize around this space, at the beginning, it seemed like this kind of magical tool that would allow us to do many things, just with the snap of our fingers. But really, this is all about, just making these very hard problems a bit smoother, a bit less challenging. It's about making rocket science easier, not making rocket science easy. And when we're looking at this space, or when we look at the enterprise overall, we've seen artificial intelligence exploding across it for, a number of years at this point, even before this current surge and takeover of the cultural zeitgeist by generative AI, driven by the release of ChatGPT about 5.5 months ago. And even before this, we were seeing a trend that would have almost 100% of companies using some type of AI by 2025. So according to our data serving a variety of data and analytics professionals across enterprise level companies, in 2020, 68% of them were using or expanding their use of AI. By 2022, that had risen to 72%, and we expected that to continue up to 100% when we were looking at these predictions last fall. Now I expect this to be up to 100% by probably the end of 2024, given the embedding and adoption of generative AI. And one important aspect of this is, even again before this current surge of attention around generative AI, is that enterprises were seeing tremendous value from their AI projects. So we saw 74% of the companies that had adopted AI in various use cases or across the company were seeing a positive return and positive effects upon their company. But let's talk about the moment that we're in right now, and obviously that is generative AI. So first, let's kind of level set and talk about what we mean by generative AI. So you can find a number of different definitions from a number of different folks, but the way we define it at Forrester, which I think is a nice, middle ground of a lot of some of the extreme views of this, is that it's a set of technologies and techniques that leverage massive corpuses of data. And these technologies and techniques include things like large language models, generative adversarial networks, diffusion models, and other types of transformer networks, and likely other types of machine learning models down the road as continued research and progress is made. And these are used to generate new content in the form of images, audio, code, and text. And the inputs currently can be natural language prompts or things like images for diffusion models. But looking to the future, we really expect to see, other types of inputs being made available. So we've seen the first generation of what we call multimodal large language models come out of the research space, things like Cosmos 1 and GPT-4 allegedly as well. And this is really, again, going to change the landscape even further. But we won't talk about that too much more now. We're going to talk about what is the already here and now capabilities and challenges to face around generative AI. So looking at the landscape today, it's come a long way very quickly. So in 2018 was when we saw the first release of, the first set of models we could truly call large language models with GPT-2 and BERT. And if we look across the next several years, there's a number of different major models that have been released. And looking at the white text here, you'll see models that are proprietary models. And then in orange, you have models that are in the open source. So as you can see, there's both a variety of open source and proprietary models just on the major side. And then if we look beyond this, there's a whole broad landscape, sea, ocean world of large language models and other types of transformers that are being made available. So there's a whole set of choices to be made around what types of models you're using and what circumstances you're using them for. And in terms of where you can use them across the enterprise, well, the possibilities are almost endless. So this is, just a quick horizontal view of some of the different types of roles that generative AI is going to impact immediately and over the next several years. So at the top, there's been a lot of conversations around marketing and design folks using generative AI to create marketing copy, to write drafts of emails, to create images for client-facing content, to work it into their digital processing or their digital content creation pipelines. And there's a lot of use there, and there's a lot of potential impacts for the future. But what we want to talk about a bit more today is the impact on sales, support, operations, and customer service. Because a lot of the impact of generative AI is not necessarily going to be in these bright, shiny chatbot customer-facing use cases that we're going to get from the marketing, design, and maybe the web teams. It's really going to come from the process and employee and customer experience augmentation use cases that we're going to get that are going to come from more of the back of the house. So in addition to the use cases around customer service and customer and employee support, there's also a ton of impacts around IT and developers and data scientists, a whole world of Turing bots that we unfortunately don't have time to go into today, but will be another layer of really changing the way we build and deploy applications into the future. So the first part of this that I want to talk about is around organizing and retrieving knowledge. And obviously, this is a huge part of delivering good service to our customers, right? We need to know who they are. We need to know who we are as a company and how can we actually serve them and meet their needs better. So we can use large language models to do things like transform knowledge into different formats for easy consumption. So as an example, I took a report that I wrote for Forrester a year or so ago around cognitive search, and then I put it into the OpenAI Playground, which is what I'm using for an example, and I asked it to summarize it for a technologically minded audience, and then it produced a quite good result, which I could then take and use for example, a LinkedIn post to drive to this report. Or if I was a marketer and the starting data point was, say, a large white paper, I could use that to turn it into a blog post, to turn it into any other or another type of written content without necessarily having to do all of the work myself. But again, this is all about augmenting the employees. So when I was doing this, and if I'm using this in customer-facing or client-facing content, I still want to use the same types of quality control and testing and other types of controls and governance on this content before it reaches the client. And this is a really important aspect of generative AI overall, is that we can't give up and we can't forget about all the important work we've done to really make sure that we build up trust and integrity with our clients through all of these managed processes over the past several years. So when you're looking at building it with generative AI, it's very important to focus on use cases where you can really control the content that is going to hit the end user and not get starry-eyed with the idea of using a chatbot or having your own corporate version of ChatGPT. That is it's a possible thing to do today, but whether that chatbot is going to function like a exemplary employee versus someone who's completely trying to sabotage your company, well, it's probably going to fall a little bit more towards the latter of those things because of the inability to control all the responses. So when looking at large language models and generative AI right now, it's important to kind of target down to these tighter types of use cases like I'm showing here. And then it's also important to keep in mind that large language models themselves are not great sources of information. So we've all seen many different examples of how, ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Bard, whatever it may be, produces really surprising, repulsive, confusing answers and responses to folks sometimes. So, there's the very well-cited example of the journalist who wrote the whole article about how how Bing Chat was trying to get him to leave his wife and things of that nature. But when we're using these things in the enterprise, it's important to, again, come away from this, broad vision of, oh, these models can do anything for us, to really tighten up how we're using them. So when we're using them to retrieve knowledge, we can focus on what they're really good at. And one of those things is translating human-generated text into some other format, like we saw before. And so we can see how that's implemented here in Bing Chat. So for example, you ask how to treat a deep cut. It's not actually going into a large language model and having that large language model write in response just from its own generative capabilities. What this is doing is actually translating that query into these two subqueries that are being run across Bing Chat, or run across the Bing search engine, pardon me, per a normal search. And then when those come back, it's taking those, reading the sets of search results, and then generating this response below. And what that does is it allows for the model to cite its sources and point to the data that is originating the summarized response, so that the user can then click through and see, what the original source of data was if they want more detail, or to verify the search results. And so in a customer service use case, we could see how this would be very useful for a customer service and support rep to basically be querying the company data that they would do with a normal search engine, in previous circumstances. And in this case, they'd be able to get a more summarized answer for perhaps a more complex question. And if we think about, some of the applications for the previous use case that we saw around summarizing the text, already many customer service and support systems do a really great job of creating call transcripts from the customer service calls. If those had a large language model applied to them, they could be very easily summarized and also have, topics, entities, major sentiments, things of that nature extracted, because again, these are large language models, so they understand language quite well for these types of use cases. And then they also allow us to work more naturally with data. So one of the very big holy grails, pies in the sky, just real bugbears of the business intelligence and also customer service and support space was the ability to interact with data in a very through a very natural language type of interface. So natural language querying has been a very big differentiator for a lot of business intelligence companies for several years. But now with large language models, again, we can use them for what they're very good at, translating a human query into, say, a more structured query that could run across an Excel spreadsheet or across a SQL database, and allowing for us to have a more naturalistic interface on the human side that is still actually able to do more interesting work on the computer side. And so what we can see this leading to down the road, is essentially, composable interfaces for customer service folks, for generating on-the-fly reports for customers that are more in-depth and contain more information, say if it's a utility provider about their usage over time, some of their savings, or if it's an insurance provider about how their health and plan has been performing. Any types of data serving we can see being delivered in a more efficient way through these large language model supported applications. But how are we going to take these broad ideas and actually apply them to our enterprise? Well, the first overall thought that I want you to put into your mind is the idea that these foundational base models will understand your world, but understand the world. But for your enterprise use cases and to differentiate from your customers, these models need to understand your world, and they also need to understand it in a more succinct way than maybe some of the largest models do. And before we get into this, talking about some of the ways of applying the models, I want us to all take a step back and remember that it's not just about the models. Models are very important, but they didn't actually drive the current explosion in attention around generative AI or around large language models generally. An application did. It was ChatGPT as a fully deployed web application with a good user interface and a good user experience that got everybody's attention and really engaged everyone very, very deeply. So when we're thinking about what the use cases could be at our own companies, it's important to really focus on what is the end experience that we are creating, not just how can we use a large language model because it's the cool thing to do. So to give you an example of how you might do this, for a customer service or employee service application, you have a query coming into your enterprise AI ML platform if you're building it yourself. And in a normal circumstance, you might pull some data from your CRM, your customer churn model, maybe your sales forecast model to answer a question about who are the best possible customers to engage with. But you want to get that back in a human readable, cited, and dynamic result. So you could deploy a large language model within your AI ML platform to summarize the data that's coming out of those systems, or to run even a search across the knowledge graph to pull out more information about those customers and how they relate to each other. Or you could use one of the many API services that are available to send data out and get it back to build, say, a set of embeddings from a larger set of content that would then be indexed and searched by a search engine and then served to the large language model to provide, say, customer service reviews as part of the result that you're looking for. Or you could take a much more hands-off approach to this and integrate an LLM simply as an API experience interaction layer within your application. So not actually fully connecting it to any of your data sources, just using it as that query translation layer to turn that natural language query into something usable by all your data sets, and then transform the data sets back into something that's readable by a human. So overall, what this means is that we want to apply the power of large language models through fine-tuning and distillation. And so what this means is we start with these base models, whether it be GPT-3, Flan T5, or some of these others. And these are very powerful. They're cool robots that can do stuff for us, but we really want to turn them into, fully fleshed out, full res droids that serve our company. So we need to fine tune them. And we do that with instruction tuning, essentially. So questions and answers, large data sets of these that we give to the model so they better understand our enterprise, our circumstance, our customers. And that's what most of us will be doing. But then there's also another step of making these models more deployable. So being able to put them into any type of form factor, whether it be a laptop or, we've been seeing some initial research around being able to run diffusion models on smartphones. There was a recent announcement from a Google research team around this. And this is what's going to allow us to actually deploy a whole variety of these models across the enterprise. Because when we're looking forward with what this is actually going to look like for us, it's going to be very similar to how we look at the landscape of machine learning models within our enterprise. We don't just have one churn model that does everything for our customer churn predictions. We have dozens or hundreds. And so for the future, we're likely to have dozens of finely distilled and tuned models deployed across our enterprise and embedded within enterprise applications. But most of us don't need to worry about all the details in there. We just need to think about how are we going to acquire these large language models? And there's 3 different paths that you can currently take, and some of these overlap depending upon the choices you make. So at the most fundamental level, if you're going to build as much as possible, you can acquire a model. And this would involve getting an open source large language model, putting it behind your own firewall, and then doing work to fine tune it with an instruction data set. And then you could create various versions for other types of use cases. This involves the most technical skill and the most work to deploy the model, but you have the most control. The next level up, we have the cloud-based API services that allow you direct access to models, but it's more of a black box because you don't fully understand what is happening on the other side of that API. These models may allow you to fine-tune on top of their base model, or they may just offer a base model that is grounded for a particular use case, such as search. And then at kind of the most abstracted level, we have applications that are increasingly embedding large language models and other types of generative AI models within their overall functionality. And we've seen the first range of these announcements come in the past few months with the announcement of 365 Copilot's integration, as well as Google Workspace's integration with large language models. And then there's a whole set of standalone tools as well for text generation, for example, at the bottom. Writer and Jasper AI. And then there's knowledge discovery tools like some of these others here at the bottom that are also starting to integrate large language models as well. Now, what is this actually going to mean for a customer experience? Well, let's very quickly touch on that before we wrap up. So what this is going to mean is that the quality and kind of customer experience that we can deliver is going to change. So we may have a customer that comes in and says, hey, I'm looking to move from Boston to Houston this year and want to know about the possible risks. A very open-ended question. Now, the response that user gets, if I kind of write it out just right here, sure, it looks like your mortgage is in good standing, blah, 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 blah. This looks like kind of a generic response that we might be able to get from a current customer service rep. The difference here is that this response could be coming from a customer service rep supported by a set of large language models, giving them a much deeper understanding of that customer to give them this exact answer for their purposes. Or it could be in a very tightly prescribed and well-tested chatbot that is actually sourcing from a number of different data sources to pull together this answer and serve up that summarized piece of knowledge to the user, like we were looking at Bing Chat. And if we take it kind of to the research and knowledge discovery side, we can see similar impacts where, we might need to find the right protein and fold for a drug that we're developing. And in the past, that would involve, going through, cognitive search databases that, may have been very advanced in terms of the semantic understanding they had of the data and the ability to serve up results. But the ability to synthesize all of the information together and link together summarizations and different pieces of content, this is really where large language models are going to help transform research and search moving into the future. So I know that was probably a lot for everyone. This is a huge space and it's hard to cover it in a very short period of time. But thank you so much for having me. Alok, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Rowan. This was very, very insightful. And I think you've sort of set the bar high that, hey, engage in whatever way, whether it's API, application, or with the offerings right now. I think there's a world of possibilities. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Garima.
Thank you. Thank you, Rowan. Thank you, Alok. It was indeed an insightful presentation, and I'm sure our audience is going home with a lot of takeaways, a lot of learnings around the generative AI applications and the possibilities out there, and also some prerequisites and considerations to consider before making use of this technology to its best possible use. So with that, I'll request our audience to put their comments, their questions in the chat, and we'll kickstart our next session for the day. Thanks, Alok. Thanks, Rowan. Customer service teams today operate in information silos, deal with spikes in request volumes and escalations, and struggle to hire and retain talent. This sets the stage for effective implementation of new context-aware conversation and information generation tools that make it possible to scale high-quality in-house customer service in ways that were not previously possible. Leveraging transformer networks and large language models have demonstrated the ability to handle common customer support tasks like case information retrieval and text or article generation out of the box without explicit task-specific training. Few short learning capabilities have reduced training costs, and LLMs can further be fine-tuned to fit domain-specific use cases for the customer support function. To dive deeper into these topics and learn best practices for integrating large language models into your customer support team, we have joining us today Vishal Sharma, who is the Chief Technology Officer at SearchUnify, and David Edelman, an AI consultant and senior business lecturer at Harvard Business School. With over 30 years of experience as a Chief Marketing Officer, David leverages his technical and analytical expertise to help several consultancy businesses. He's an insights-driven executive with an unwavering commitment to innovation and results, combined with the dedication to customers' needs. Welcome, David, to SEO Innovate.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. It's great having you here. With more than 15 years experience working on support optimization models and enabling improved self-service outcomes with the power of AI, Vishal is a central point for technology innovation at SearchUnify, a unified cognitive platform. Welcome, Vishal, to SEO Innovate.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
And without taking any more time, Vishal, I'll hand it off to you to set the stage for this session.
Awesome. What an exciting topic, Garima, and thank you so much for the warm welcome and introductions as well. LLMs, you've seen some crazy development in this space in the last 6 months, I would say. And it's not just about LLMs, but I think some of the things that we are seeing now is actually doing very domain-specific large language models as well, which are specific to those use cases. So some crazy things happening in this space. And one of the things that I really want to call it in the beginning itself is, even though the core algorithm sits around word prediction, but I think it's definitely a moment where we can think of tons of use cases for support. We just need to step back and see what are the different functions, day-to-day jobs that support teams are doing, where we can leverage all of these models. And I'm sure we've got an amazing guest today, David, with us. And David, you probably will have so many use cases that you would probably want to share about the support. And but before we get into that, I really want to get your this thing into you see, I mean, you get a new technology, everyone wants to be the first in that, right? And you don't want to miss this thing. You want to be those early adopters. Any interesting anecdotes that you have based on seeing different customers trying to do the experiment with generative AI that you would want to share with our audience?
Yeah, a couple, and it's in the early days. Everyone's just starting to play around with it. And especially they are being careful, though, not yet to expose it directly to customers, because there's still a lot of risks involved. But behind the scenes, here's a couple of really good anecdotes. So for one healthcare company, one of the challenges is going through as many as 9 different computer screens to go into different databases to answer questions such as whether a particular member is eligible for a benefit, and if so, what would it cost them, and where, which is a local doctor where they can take advantage of that. And there's a number of pieces in that question. And I think when we look at generative AI, we shouldn't just look at only its ability to generate language, it also generates code. And so what this company is doing is giving a prompt interface to the reps so that they can just simply say, is Vishal eligible for this? Just taking the questions I just said, is Vishal eligible for this particular benefit? If so, what will it cost? And then the code gets written by the generative AI, goes into the various systems and pulls out a simple language answer. So they are starting to use that instead of having to spend the money to literally integrate 9 different systems, which is quite challenging to do and a big cost, using the generative AI to reach in and pull together the answer for the rep. So that's one example. And I think that whole concept of enabling people to do more complex tasks through a simple prompt is something we should think about, not just the language aspects of it. Another example, and this is from a telecom company, where they're using the AI to look at natural language processing of all the calls they get in X period of time. So let's say a day, a week, and then use that natural language processing to create summaries of what were the hot topics. Because the reps are not very good after a call at classifying what an actual call was about, what the issues were. And they also don't capture things like language and tonality. Are they angry? Things like that. And so this AI can actually go into the recordings that happen between a rep and a customer and pull out major things. So for example, one of the things that they found were people were calling in because they were having trouble with an app to actually pay a bill online. And they were able to find that within a day, immediately, that people were calling in with that and can track that right to the app, figure out, oh, it was our latest release that we did of the new Apple iOS version of the app. There must be a bug. So let's get right into that and fix that. So, that's another kind of thing where you're using the generative AI to take a large amount of language, all that natural language processing, summarize that down and bring up some key things that managers can act upon. So those are things already that people are using. There are tools out there to enable that. It's still, again, as you can tell, behind the scenes. It's not a customer directly interfacing with it, but it's a start. And the tools are coming out there. Vishal, I bet in your area, in SearchUnify and in Grazidi overall, there's a lot of questions about whether people should create their own tools, whether they should use off-the-shelf tools, how to integrate those tools into their environments. I'm sure there's some guidelines and things you're thinking about in terms of the strategies for how your clients should get into the game and start playing.
Well, it's a great question. And we've been getting such inquiries already. And if you ask me, the vendor at my heart would always say that go and just buy it instead of building it. But fundamental level, I think it boils down to the three simple things, and I just call it as easy score: cost, effort, and control at the end of the day, right? If you pick anything off the shelf, it's not very expensive to begin with. You just have to pay for the cost of inference for all of these large language models. If you talk about the effort, that also is, I think, not too high. Learning curve is not very high. You just need to understand basic how LangChain, chain, and all these kind of things work. So it's easy to get started. I think if you just pick off the shelf OpenAI or take Hugging Face, any other example, easy to get started, I would say. But when you talk about the control, then there is a question mark, right? You really don't know what sort of a data it's been trained on. At the end of the day, where is your data going? Is it being used for something else as well? We've already seen certain lapses in the past 2 months, security lapses. So I think when it comes to the control, then definitely I think you really don't have that piece. It's completely black box for you at the end of the day. But similarly, on the other side, if you go for something which is more in-house and you try and build it against just going for these off the shelf, cost is pretty high. I mean, these models are running on GPUs, right? Not everyone has that sort of infrastructure in place. So you can't really think of actually deploying anything in-house. You can always think of doing some sort of a quantization, doing a stripped down version of models and just put it in your infrastructure. But that costs you the accuracy, right, at the end of the day. So I think, obviously, I would say if you have something which you kind of just go and test some sort of a pilot, I would strongly suggest use off the shelf, try it, test the results. If you're thinking of building a more scalable integration, because technically all of these things off the shelf that you're using, there's a low starting cost, but as you scale the setup, that is going to be expensive. And you don't have any control on that. So again, like if you're thinking of building something for a long term or something that has to scale in future, then possibly you would probably want to just bring it in your infrastructure locally, just build it, try it, and then there are other things you can do. For example, few short learning, Garima already pointed out in the introductions as well. These are like some smart techniques that you can use, and you really don't have to go through huge cycles of training as well. This is why I think one of the things within our product as well, David, the direction that we are taking is that we want to be very open to our customers in terms of the kind of technology for these generative and LLMs they want to pick at the end of the day. So our direction is like, come to the interface, just do a plug and play, try the different models, something which is off the shelf, something which is already available in SearchUnify. You try it, test it, do the benchmarking. And at times, for a feature like spell check, a certain model will work better than the other models, right? For a feature like content findability or a conversational AI, the other things might just be better than something which you're taking from Hugging Face or OpenAI. So I think that's a call we want our customers to take in our product as well. One of the other thing which is I think important, and that's again like we've been slightly cautious, is that we respect that. I mean, if you see at the end of the day, the problem with all of these large language models is hallucination. How do you avoid that? How do you ensure that you make sure that even if you're trying some of these things, the response that you're serving to the end users is accurate and it's something that users can actually trust at the end of the day, because that's all about in enterprise. So I think this is where also we are kind of ensuring that we respect the privacy, we respect the security, and at the end of the day, we also set some sort of a context while leveraging these integrations and models to ensure the information that we're serving is accurate as well. And that brings me to another question I have for you is, and you've written an amazing piece on HPR as well, that how you can actually leverage the power of generative AI to build those personalized interfaces within product as well. So the future is more where you're not really looking at menus and those kind of things, but the product is really looking at the whole journey and trying to understand what you really want to do at the end of the day, what features or what information you're looking for within the product. And there's a thin line of, you see, personalization, the moment you add the personalization on top of these large language models, you start getting these questions around the accuracy and privacy and security, as I mentioned. One of the things that where I want your take is, do you think because for us, I think we're just feeling that anything we are doing, any integration we are doing, there has to be some human angle at the end to review what is being produced. But based on your experience, David, do you also think there's some sort of a thing that you're seeing where the support agents and AI can actually work in parallel? They can just complement each other, and they can do much better. We can build much better personalization experiences for the end customers. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you an example of where I think this can go. One of the things that reps can have when a customer calls in, for example, is a lot more information about that customer's context. So let's actually take the example I talked about earlier about somebody who had a problem getting something done on an app. So let's think about that customer who had a problem on an app calling into customer service. Let's actually use AI to do a number of different things. So when the rep is about to get the call, the system can actually go immediately in to the various databases at the telecom company and say, what's been the journey of this customer? What's the context of this customer? So a bit more about who this person is, what products they have, and what have been the 5 interactions that that customer has had with the company across channels before. So let's bring all of that together in terms of the customer's journey. And let's actually know from AI and pattern recognition that they could not get done a task on the app. So now that comes into the rep. Now the rep has that information. Generative AI can actually provide right there a prompt to the rep of what they should tell the customer. So if this is a legitimate problem, that's a bug. There may not be a lot the customer can do, and the rep could take care of it for the customer, again, with a generative AI interface for the rep, where the rep can say, here's how this customer wants to pay a bill. Please send a link to the customer that can help them actually get this done. If it's something where the rep should instruct the customer, it can provide that information. But again, it could just provide a link to the rep that they can email to the customer, and the customer can take action. And some of this where the rep can actually be in the middle, look it over, make sure it makes sense. But a lot of it helping the rep get something done for the customer by interpreting the customer's context and then generating a capability for either the rep or the customer to take action. I think the key here, and this is an interesting question, I think too, Vishal, is the ability of these large language models, not just to pull everything from the general internet, it's actually to pull from all of your own enterprise systems. So the large language model may be originally trained to develop its algorithmic capabilities off the broader internet, but then when you actually want to apply it, you're applying it within the domains of your own systems. And I know that's something SearchUnify has really focused on in building that. And I think that's an important distinction that people have to recognize, that these models don't always have to go out to the broader internet. You can just have them work within your domains. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think some of the beta programs that we're doing, David, with our customers revolve around all of this only. As you rightly said, you can't be just sending everything to these large language models and then assuming that the response which is coming is you can just directly throw that to the end user. There has to be a context setup that has, context building has to happen. Some sort of, I would say, feature training is also required. Prompt engineering is also required. Some of these new things that we're doing, they're important because in enterprise, you really can't be inaccurate in the information you're serving. Couple of examples, if I could give you the use cases we've been taking is, for example, conversational AI is one thing. Traditionally, you've seen the chatbots being very menu driven, or at the best, they can just serve you some search results at the end of the day. One of the interesting use cases is how do you generate more natural responses from those search results via bot? So this is accurate because it's actually serving from that restricted content set only, help set only, and not from everything that large language models have learned. And the power that you're leveraging is just to convert those responses and trying to make them more natural, which obviously increases the probability of user actually digesting that information and resolving the problem. So conversational AI is one thing, and then similarly in product search is also becoming very interesting with generative AI now. As you also highlighted in your piece that you've written on HPR, same sort of integrations we're also doing where within product you can just open and you can ask just open-ended questions to the chatbot. Okay, show me the top 10 queries that were searched by the customers today. It takes you to that report and understand the question, right? Just takes the user right away to that report. Similarly, okay, how do you really upload this list into a marketing automation software? You go to the documentation, read the documentation, fetch the steps, do a baby step kind of this thing response to the end user, and they can just implement that. The other use cases where we are actually started generating some content as well, which is in support. If you see the concept of KCS support agents, they always struggle with generating new help articles. So they get an issue, they work on the issue, they resolve the issue. But what if you get the same issue again, right? So at the end of the day, someone has to write a piece of content so that if you see the same issue again, can be resolved quickly, or if you serve it to the end users as well, then you can see some self-service as well. And generally, we've seen support agents, they hate to write, they don't like writing. And this is where generative AI is becoming very powerful. We've been able to integrate that in the software where right on the agent screen, when they're actually resolving a case, we can generate the possible article that they should be writing, like the title of the article, some sort of a summary, some sort of template that they can pick. So this is very powerful. The other I would say is at times, customer support agents, they get long cases, huge attachments. Takes a lot of time to go through that information and kind of really get the gist of what the customer is asking for. You build a simple summarization integration, and you kind of like show that to the support agent, makes it very easy for the agents to move forward with that ticket. So I think these are like some of the interesting use cases that we are doing. We are very early stage, and some of these things we'll probably highlight in our next session also, which product team is doing. But we are very open to the feedback from our customers that they can just come and join us, play with all of these integrations. We're also in the early stages. But yeah, I mean, some cool stuff already happening.
Really exciting. Those are some great examples.
Thank you, Vishal, for those great examples. Any closing remarks, David, before we move on to the next session?
I think just my own closing remark is just think about this not just as a way to generate language, as I said before, but really as creating gateways for reps or for customers to get complicated things done. And it's not just about writing something, it's about getting broader capabilities executed.
I completely agree. I think it's content writers were probably the first one to start looking at generative AI, but I think every team we can see in our this thing here as well. I've been talking to somebody at sales ops. Every other team, I think, can start leveraging the use cases with generative
Everyone
AI.
can be a coder.
Yeah, everyone can be a coder. You're right. I mean, a little bit of a coding knowledge, and you can just build any integration. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Thanks, Vishal. I think this was a great session. A lot of insights for our audience to take, and I would encourage the audience to leave their comments, leave their questions in the chat, and we'll definitely get back to them. And based on these insights, I think I can safely conclude that as a lot of these LLM integrations and LLM fuel solutions become commercially available, it is very essential that these new models are domain trained. They are, we start off these integration solutions for non-customer, low risk use cases to start off with, and of course provide better enterprise grades security as we go forward. Thanks, David. Thanks, Vishal, for joining us today, and we're excited to kick off our next panel.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
We have had some interesting discussions up until now, and if I were to quickly summarize some key takeaways for the benefit of our audience, I would say find time to experiment with generative AI in a manner that reaps benefits while staying mindful of potential pitfalls. Your first stop is your security and risk team to make sure you're following best practices for responsible AI. Start with maybe one or two low-risk use cases that will not disrupt your customer-facing operations. Finally, ask tough questions of your vendor partners around the underlying training data and content moderation for both the input and the output. With that, I'm excited to kickstart our next session with SearchUnify's own in-house experts as they demonstrate and discuss how SearchUnify's all-new LLM-infused platform and products are set to enable enterprises to ride the LLM wave. I have joining me Bharat Sethi, who is the product manager here at SearchUnify, and Taranjeet Singh, principal data scientist at SearchUnify. Taran, Bharat, welcome to the session.
Hi, Garima.
Hey, Garima. Hey, everyone.
Hey, Garima. Hey, everyone.
With that, Bharat, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Garima. It's been a great event so far, and happy to be here today. We recently announced that SearchUnify platform is fully integrated with OpenAI and Hugging Face. We are on top of the LLM wave across all our products of SearchUnify. We did this to ensure that we further elevate capabilities like conversational AI, content generation, summarization, etc. Let me introduce you to SearchUnify's all-new LLM-enriched platform. The time is now to experience the next-gen customer support. Great. I'll take this opportunity to raise the curtains on our two new products, SUA and Nobler. All right, so SUVA, also known as SearchUnify Virtual Assistant, it was formerly called SearchUnify's chatbot in a suite of applications, and Nobler, also called Knowledge Enabler, that was initially called KCS Enabler applications inside SU's ecosystem. And now let's take a look at a little bit about what are the capabilities of SUA and Nobler. Starting with a little bit about SUA, it's called a key to self-service for millennials. It provides personal and prompt responses to user queries using some of the key capabilities like entity recognition, NLP, intent detection. Let's take a look at how SUA is different from a traditional chatbot. SUA possesses the capability to personalize the interaction after understanding context. SUA seamlessly hands off the conversation to live support agents if required from the same chat window. It can create discussions, it can create cases on the behalf of the user if required, right from where the user is present. It can also support your workflows for HR and IT. And one of the key differentiators that we have in the industry is the adapters that we possess. One of the adapters is obviously SearchUnify's cognitive technology and the cognitive search that we already have as a part of ecosystem, so that it powers the bot, and there's no use case left where the answer, the user puts in a query and the bot says, I don't have any answer for it, because there are some set of most relevant search results which are powering the bot at the backend as a fallback. All right, time to meet Nobler. Nobler is world's first knowledge-enabled customer service software. Nobler revolutionized knowledge creation, discovery, and reuse. Let's take a look at the top features which Nobler possesses. The key pain point of the support manager is motivating their support agents to become knowledge workers and capturing the knowledge while they're resolving cases. Nobler can auto-populate content inside some predefined templates and present it to the agents when they are about to close the case. It has ability to reuse, review, and fix existing knowledge. Some key analytics, like support effectiveness. Support effectiveness means like when some of the articles which are created via Nobler, whether they are being used and shared further or being attached to cases or not, and contributor analysis. If there are too many agents, which of the agents are actually creating knowledge and which are not. And it's not just about closing the loop, creating knowledge. It's about setting the content standard, whether the articles being created are complete, unique, accurate, or not. At this point, SearchUnify's all products are now under the umbrella of large language models. And there are so many features across all these products which are now LLM powered. And I'll now hand it over to principal data scientist of SearchUnify and my friend Taranjit Singh, who will walk you through all those features across multiple products. Okay.
Thank you, Bharat, for that generous introduction. And I'll be speaking about how do we actually integrate all of these technologies into the 3 different platforms of SearchUnify. One side, we have SUA, which will take the benefits of large language models using conversational AI and contextual responses. Then we have Nobler, which will use article title suggestions and summarization as a benefit from large language models. Nobler is more close to generative AI because the purpose of Nobler would be to create coherent and consistent knowledge base from the cases that your agents are getting. And last but not the least, our cognitive search, SearchUnify itself, would get a boost and evolution of features like named entity recognition, re-ranking, direct answers, and much more. Though these first features were already working on SearchUnify's proprietary algorithms and models, they will benefit from large language models and will enable you to use things like chain prompting, prompt engineering to take them to the next level. I'll start with a quick demo of how do you even integrate these APIs into our system. The first thing to do would be to get your OpenAI key or Hugging Face key. And once you have that, all you need to do is go to our integration screen where you will find the prompt for most of the popular inference platforms already ready. We understand that the number of inference platforms that will provide these kind of large language models will continue to grow. Hence, we are ready to make sure that even in the future, you have the integration with all the major large language models ready. Before we proceed further, I would like to have a word of caution. So SearchUnify does its very best to gate and mitigate most of the issues that we have with the large language models, like other people able to see your queries and things like that, you have to be careful when sharing your data with these third-party integrations. OpenAI, for example, would use your data to train their models and serve other customers. And you have to figure out that whether you're comfortable with sharing your data in there. Our opinion, our preference would be to use only public-facing data with OpenAI integration. And when you want to work with something more private, more discrete, with lot of personal identifiable information, use modules or inference platforms like Hugging Face, which provide you dedicated instance that make sure that your data is secure within your VPC. You still have to be mindful that if you're using single model to serve multiple users, the memory doesn't make sure that one of the users is able to see the answers of the other. SearchUnify can help you mitigate some of these problems with its integration. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about, the demo of conversational AI. The conversational AI is the biggest benefit, the biggest achievement that large language models are able to provide. You don't have to set up the content. You don't have to set up the intent. You come in, you upload a document, you upload a certain context, and your chatbot is ready to play around and give you answers. And that's the kind of functionality that we are looking in SearchUnify too. Conversational AI is able to bring exact answers from what is present in the vanilla ChatGPT. The vanilla ChatGPT will never have the context. Let's talk about the demo that we are seeing in the screen. For example, if I ask that, hey, can you tell me about SearchUnify briefly, this particular context that you're seeing here, or the steps to add taxonomy in SearchUnify, these are specific to SearchUnify documentation, even though large language models and ChatGPT would have trained on the public-facing content, they wouldn't give you this exact answer because they lack the context. On the left-hand side, you can see that this is the generic answer that we get from ChatGPT. These large language models dilute the knowledge that we have by generalizing and aggregating them into a singular template. And whenever they match a keyword, they present these templates in the generic way possible, trying to match it with your platform. But when you use SearchUnify's bot, we'll make sure that the text that you need to get the exact answers, the exact conversation is respected. And you will be able to tune and play around with this and still respect the logic-based flows that you so love about SU bots. In the next screen, we're going to talk about Nobler. One of the most awaited features in generative AI is the title generation, and of course, the summarization. What kind of knowledge can we provide when we already know the context and the description? For example, in this particular case, you are seeing that we have a case with subject and description about NER, which your user is coming in and creating. When an agent is assigned to create an article for this, if you're using large language models, if you're using Nobler, you will have a consistent and well-represented articles coming in. For example, in this case, when I go to create an article, the title NER optimal search is already auto-filled by our large language model. And this will be present for all the cases where the description is in a way that titles can be created for them. And the next slide, we'll talk about article quality index. And what does it even mean, right? Large language models and even content generation, whether it in the form of generative or not, suffer from a lot of pitfalls, whether the article is unique or not, whether the article is coherent or not, whether the link presence are relevant or not. We all know that because of LLMs prone to hallucination, there will be many times that you'll have to validate that whether the links that this particular LLM is providing is relevant or coherent or not, right? Most of the times, when we force the LLM to create links for us, it will create some dummy links that lead to a 404, or it will hallucinate. It will provide information that it thinks is true, but it's not. And that's where most of the features, most of the parameters in the article quality index comes in, so that you can make sure that the content that you're creating using generative models are well articulated, they're not profane, They're not hallucinated. The sources that are represented are actual present or not. In the next slide, we're going to talk about one of the core features that SearchUnify is going to inherit from LLMs. Large language models are prone to miss the domain specification of your enterprise. If you're looking to get an answer that is suitable or particular to your exercise, if you're looking for an answer that is particular to your enterprise and not the information found in internet or journal purpose dictionaries, you'll be in some trouble when you're using ChatGPT. A classic example of this would be if you're searching for Chronos in ChatGPT. It might tell you about the god of space and time. But if you're looking for a specific set of answer based on your enterprise, which is Chronos, the company, you might fall into some pitfalls. And that's why transfer learning, or understanding the context, providing the prompt engineering and templates, is essential when using these kind of information. And SearchUnify's named entity recognition was already able to do that, and would be now leveraging LLMs to make sure the keywords that you're asking represents the article that should match with that named entity and not just any keyword. And the next slide, we see the example of one of the most awaited features, direct answers. Direct answers are powerful. If you have your knowledge segregated in multiple documents and someone needs to understand and read and create a direct answer for them, that can be now only done by agents. More often than not, you'll see the case comments filled with multiple articles where your agent is saying that, hey, why don't you go to this article and copy this part and move on to the next article and use that part to create a well-structured answer. But with the advent of direct answers, your large language models, your SearchUnify platform in the form of direct answer would be able to serve you these answers. One of the toughest questions that we get in SearchUnify is, what is the max depth of website crawling that you can do? And here we can see that it's able to understand that, pull it up from our documentation and give that answer as 10. And now I'd like to hand over to Garima to take this all further. Thank you.
Thanks, Taran. Thanks, Bharat. I think for our audience, these are some great insights, and we would love for our audience to share their questions or comments in the chat. And I would like to welcome our audience to visit our website and get a one-on-one consultation with our AI ML experts and see for yourself how these LLM-infused features can elevate your customer support ecosystem. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. We'll share the recording shortly after the event. Thank you, everyone.